All right, ladies and gentlemen, today we are taking a look at section 6.3 with function composition. So hopefully the first part of this section should be a little bit of a review. And this is when we were looking at evaluating a particular function at a given value. Okay, so if I look at these first couple questions, letter A tells me that we want to evaluate f of 2. With this f in front, this tells me I'm going to want to use function f. And I'm going to plug in 2 anywhere I see an x in the equation. So if I want to write this out, I'm going to say, well, I have 3 times 2. I'm going to plug that value in, minus 2. And you can see that I'm only making a substitution for x. Okay, so I can go ahead and evaluate. 3 times 2 is 6. 6 minus 2 gives me an answer of 4. So that is going to be our final answer. Likewise, for letter B, I'm going to plug in -1 anywhere I see x, except the only difference is that I'm going to use function g. So if I plug this in, I'm going to have -1 squared minus 2 times -1 plus 1. So -1 squared, -1 times -1 gives me 1. -2 times -1 gives me positive 2, and positive 1 at the end gives me a total of 4 once again. Okay, the second couple of problems get a little bit more difficult, and I'm asked to use function g and function f. So I'm always going to start with what's on the inside first. So the very first thing that we want to do is evaluate f of 2. So I'm going to go ahead and plug in 2 to function f. So I'm going to have 3 times 2 minus 2 equals 4. And now I'm going to work my way on the outside. So now I'm going to take 4 and plug it in to g. So if I do that, I should have 4 squared minus 2 times 4 plus 1. Well, we know that 4 squared is 16. 16 minus 8 is 8. And 8 plus 1 gives us a final answer of 9. Okay, last but not least, we're going to use that same process where we start on the inside. So the very first thing I want to do is evaluate g of -1. So I'm going to plug in -1 to function g. You should see that we already did this one for example B. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to use our solution. So I already know that g of -1 gives us an answer of positive 4. As soon as I find my answer for the inside portion, I'm going to take this and I'm going to plug it into the outside. So I'm going to go ahead and plug it into f. So f of 4 equals 3 times 4 minus 2. Remember that when you're evaluating, you're only looking at the function itself. So 3 times 4 is 12, and 12 minus 2 gives me a final answer of 10. Okay, now we want to take this a step further, and one thing that we can keep in mind is that we can do this with functions as well as integers, just like we've been doing up until this point. So for example 1, we are going to say let f of x equals 6x and g of x equals 4x plus 5. So those are my first two functions that I'm using. The first one says that we want to take g of x, because we start on the inside. We're going to take g of x and we're going to plug it in where we see x in function f. So we have to be really careful, and we'll do some more practice on Monday, but we have to be really careful how we set this up. So I'm going to say 6 times whatever I'm plugging in, and I'm going to square that. I'm making a substitution only for x. Okay, remember, anytime we have a binomial squared, I do have to FOIL that out. So if I FOIL that, I should have 16x squared plus 40x plus 25. And now my last step is going to be to go ahead and distribute this 6 to all of our terms. So our final answer should be 96x squared plus 240x plus 150. Okay, for the second one, we want to go ahead and take function f and plug it in where we see x and g. So we start on the inside and we plug it into whatever's on the outside. So if I write this out, I should have 4 times our new x plus 5. So this one is a little bit simpler because I don't have to FOIL. 4 times 6x squared gives me 24x squared plus 5. I can't simplify it, so I'm actually done. That's going to be my final answer. For the next one, it looks like we are taking g of x and we are plugging it in to itself. So we're making a substitution for x. So I'm going to say 6 times 6x squared. I'm going to square that. Remember that we are only substituting for the one variable. So the first thing that I'm going to do with this is I'm going to square this. So I'm going to have 6 times 6 squared is 36. X squared squared, remember to multiply the exponents, is going to give me x to the 4th power. And we can simplify this to be 216x to the 4th power. Now, I just realized I made a little bit of a mistake. I accidentally used f of x. So let's cross this off. Let's just go ahead and call this f of x. And we'll evaluate this one as g of x. I do apologize for that, but hopefully we can fix this. Okay, so this is actually looking at f of x. I took function f and I plugged it into itself. Now let's do the same thing over here for g. Okay, so I want to take function g and I'm going to plug it in where I see x. So I'm going to have 4 times 4x plus 5 plus 5. I know I want to distribute this 4, so 4 times 4x gives me 16x. 4 times 5 gives me 20 plus 5, and our final answer should be 16x plus 25. Okay, so please make sure that you are checking to see which function you are starting with. Remember to always start on the inside and then work your way out. So let's try a couple more on this front side and then I'll let you do some practice on your own. For example 2, we have two functions, f of x and g of x. And f and g is just a different way of naming our equation, so we know which one is which. So for example 2, I'm starting with g and I'm plugging it in to x, just x. So I'm going to have 3 times, and plug in my function for x, and then I'm going to subtract 4. So we can go ahead and distribute. So I have 3x squared minus 3 minus 4. And as soon as you do all that, just make sure that you are simplifying. So our final answer should be 3x squared minus 7. Okay, moving on to the second one. I want to take f of x. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to plug it in wherever I see x. So if I set this one up, I should have 3x minus 4 squared minus 1. Now keep in mind, anytime you have something like this, if you have a set of parentheses squared, you do have to FOIL. So if I write this out, I'm going to have 9x squared minus 24x plus 16, and I still have to subtract that 1, so our final answer for this one should be 9x squared minus 24x plus 15. Okay, so we're hopefully starting to see some patterns. Start with the inside, work our way out. For this third one, okay, I'm using function g. I'm taking it and I'm plugging it in where I see x. So I'm going to have x squared minus 1 squared minus 1. Now, once again, I have two terms and I'm squaring them. I do have to go through and FOIL. This is going to give me x to the 4th power minus 2x squared plus 1 minus 1. I can't forget this minus 1 on the outside. So, combining like terms, we get an answer of x to the 4th power minus 2x squared plus 0. So I can go ahead and leave my final answer as this. Okay, finally, last but not least, we want to go ahead and we want to say f of x. So I'm going to erase this. I'm using function f, and I'm going to plug it in where I see x. So 3 times 3x minus 4 minus 4. So we're plugging in the entire equation, the entire function just for x. So if I simplify, I have 9x minus 12 minus 4 And of course, we get a final answer of 9x minus 16. Okay, go ahead and flip over to the back side. I give you a couple more practice problems. I'm going to ask you right now to go ahead and pause the video. Please try these problems on your own. Make sure that you identify which functions you're using and which function you want to start with if we are using the process of function composition. So please pause, try numbers 1 through 4, and then come back to check your answers. Right, ladies and gentlemen, hopefully we did okay on these couple of problems. Remember for number 1 that we want to start with f of 3. So my first step is going to be to plug in 3 to function f. I'm going to get my answer. I get -1. And then remember, we're going to work backwards. So I'm going to go ahead and plug it into function g. So -1 squared gives me +1. +1 plus 4 gives me +5. So 5 is going to be our final answer. Okay, for number 2, we're looking at f of g of x, so I'm starting with g of x, and I'm going to plug it into f. So I'm going to have 4 times 5x minus 2 to the power of -1. Now remember, if we have a power of -1, we want to go ahead and move it into our denominator so that that exponent becomes positive. And anything raised to the power of +1 just stays as itself. So our final answer should be 4 over 5x minus 2. Okay, take a look at number 3. For number 3, we're starting with g of x. So I'm going to take g of x and I'm going to plug it into f. So I'm going to get 6 times 4x plus 5 to the power of -2. I still have that negative exponent, so I'm going to want to move it into the denominator with a positive exponent. And I do have to FOIL. I have 2 terms on the inside of parentheses in my denominator, so I am going to want to multiply that out. So we should have 6 over 16x squared plus 40x plus 25. Okay, now, for example 4, I asked you to do 2 function composition. So the first one said start with h and plug it into g. So unfortunately in this case I have a fraction that I'm squaring, and we know that anytime we square a fraction, it's really multiplying something by itself. So if I multiply 2 fractions, I'm going to multiply across. So x minus 2 times x minus 2 gives me x squared minus 4x plus 4. And 5 minus 5 is, or 5 times 5 is going to get us positive 25. The last thing that I have to do is to go ahead and distribute this negative sign that's on the outside. So my final answer is going to become negative x squared plus 4x minus 4 divided by 25. Now, finally, for the last part, we are asked to evaluate h of g of x. So I'm taking function g, and I'm plugging it into f. So here's function g. I substituted it into x for our first function, and this is actually going to be our final answer. There's nothing that we can do to simplify that numerator with the denominator. So I know part of this section might be a review for you. Some of it might be a little bit new. We will get some more practice in over the next couple of days for the start of next week. So please make sure that you come to class. Please ask questions about anything that doesn't make sense from the notes, and hopefully we will be on our way to understanding this a little bit better. Have a good weekend, guys.